Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Dan. This is my first YouTube video, and as you can see, it's pretty crude, so it's kind of long, but I really wanted to cover the several scandals and conspiracies, cover-ups, etc. relating to Hillary Clinton, going back to the early part of her career. The new stuff has been well documented about her email server and all that other good stuff, but I figured there's a lot of people that are young and maybe don't realize all of the controversies, scandals, cover-ups, etc., going back to her early career. I'm talking even 40 years ago. And then up until the time where the Clintons got into the White House and then left the White House. And that's where I'm going to cut it off. For anybody else wanting more information about the scandals relating to Hillary and her Secretary of State and pay for play, I strongly urge that you watch the documentary Clinton Cash, which you can get on YouTube also. So with that being said, let's take a brief walk in time and look at the history, maybe the forgotten history of Hillary Clinton. Thanks for watching. Okay, so we begin in 1974. And at that time, Hillary Rodham had just graduated from law school, and she was asked to come work on the Senate Judiciary Committee, her first congressional job, in writing the articles of impeachment against our then President Nixon. This is the Watergate scandal, and I'm going to post an article here. Benghazi, Hillary's second Watergate. This is from the Washington Post, and you can see towards the bottom, however, she was fired from that job. Okay, her boss, a guy by the name of Jerome Zeifman, he was the chief of staff to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And listen to what he had to say about Hillary and her work on that committee. Because she was a liar, she was an unethical, dishonest lawyer. She conspired to violate the Constitution, the rules of the House, the rules of the committee, and the rules of confidentiality. In another article here, the Republican counsel and chief staff director for the Senate Judiciary Committee by the name of Franklin Polk confirmed Hillary wrote a brief arguing Nixon should not be granted legal counsel due to a lack of precedent. But Clinton deliberately ignored the then recent Supreme Court case of William O. Douglas, who was allowed to have a lawyer during the impeachment. Zeifman continues, Clinton bolstered her fraudulent brief by removing all of the Douglas files from public access and storing them at her office. Stealing files, storing them at her office, does that ring any bells? Enabling her to argue as if the case never existed. Okay, so what happened here was Hillary was hired on to the Senate Judiciary Committee to help write the articles of impeachment against Nixon. But she had a different agenda. What she actually did was meeting secretly and illegally with the then Senator Ted Kennedy, Democratic senator, and his political advisors on ways to not impeach him, but to actually keep him in office. The thought there was, as long as Nixon stayed in office, and if he made it to the 1976 elections, with all the corruption surrounding his Republican administration, that whoever the Democratic candidate was for president in 1976 would probably win. That was her agenda. This really happened. So what she did was she stole all the files from public access. There was no internet back then. These are actual physical files. She went out and stole all the files relating to the impeachment of the Supreme Court Justice, William O'Donnell, and stored them in her office. And this is her very first job and her very first connection to our government. Welcome to the world of Hillary Clinton. Okay, so the next scandal that the Clintons were involved in was back in the 70s and early 80s. They had friends called the McDougalls, Jim and Susan McDougal, who owned a really shady and sleazy savings and loan company called Madison Guaranty. I'm going to post up on the screen here. You can pull it up anywhere you want. It's called the Whitewater Controversy. And it actually broke through a New York Times article in 1992 when Bill Clinton was running for president. But all of these crimes and sleazy business ventures were back in the 70s and 80s. So Whitewater began with an investigation into the real estate investments of Bill and Hillary Clinton and their associates, Jim and Susan McDougal, in the Whitewater Development Corporation, a failed business venture in the 70s and 80s. Well, I'm going to post up some notes from unredacted versions of the OIC. That's the Office of Independent Counsel for the White House. They're the ones that investigate all corruption and fraud and whatnot within our government. And you can read just to get a sense of what we're talking about here. I'll read a little bit. The broad contours of the Whitewater case against Mrs. Clinton are well known. With Governor Bill Clinton running Arkansas, Mrs. Clinton leveraged her work at the Rose Law Firm into a series of transactions on behalf of a corrupt financial institution, Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan, run by long-term Clinton crony James McDougal. Among the transactions was a document crafted by Mrs. Clinton to conceal a series of fraudulent loans that were used to deceive federal bank examiners. The fraudulent loans were part of a land deal known as Castle Grand. Mrs. Clinton, along with her Rose law firm partner Webster Hubbell, later given a high-ranking post at the Justice Department by President Clinton, handled the Madison Guaranty accounts. Okay, so this is the OIC's unredacted version of a memo that they're drafting for a criminal case against Mrs. Hillary Clinton. I'll quote from the article here and we'll move on. Here is how we would characterize the case in legal terms of an indictment. The object of the conspiracy was to conceal by unlawful means the true facts relating to Hillary Rodham Clinton's and Webster Lee Hubbell's relationship with Seth Ward, Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan, and Madison Financial Corporation. By concealing these facts, Hillary Rodham Clinton and Webster Lee Hubbell would avoid and evade potential criminal and civil liability, fraudulently secure additional income for the Rose Law Firm, and safeguard the political campaigns of William Jefferson Clinton. What this means in practice is that Hillary Clinton and Hubbell may have been involved in a crime in 1986. When they realized their potential criminal and civil and political exposure, they concealed their activities repeatedly and with great effect. The case would be the story of how that happened. The crime, Castle Grand cross loans, and an option agreement drafted by Mrs. Clinton were used to deceive federal bank examiners. Okay, so it's a complicated story, but basically Bill and Hillary were investing alongside of these sleazy people, the McDougals, who owned a really shady SNL, which was later shut down due to fraud. Much of that fraud was including the Clintons. Hillary was working as the lawyer defending Madison Guaranty against the federal bank examiners in their investigations. The thought was, let's have Hillary represent us and defend us against the state regulators because her husband happens to be the governor of the state. So it gives me a headache. It's just wild to think about this. So the story broke in 1992 when Bill's running for president, and she's actually called in front of a grand jury to testify. Keep in mind, this is the only first lady in history ever to be under a federal investigation. Now, both of them, together and separately, are under federal criminal investigations even before they step foot into the White House. Bill wins the presidency. They start looking into this investigation. They put the OIC in charge of it. Hillary testifies in front of a grand jury that she really doesn't have anything to do with the Madison Guaranty. It's another lawyer that's working on it, and she doesn't really understand what's happening there. And then they ask her for several documents, billing records, and so forth. And lo and behold, she can't find them. The Rose Law Firm can't find them. They took them. They stole them. So as to not implicate Hillary in her direct representation of Madison Guaranty. Some people might be asking, well, if all of these claims were true, why wasn't Hillary indicted? Why didn't she go to jail? Things like that. Well, the short answer is twofold. Number one, it wasn't that simple. From political purposes, I mean, she's the first lady of the White House, married to the president. So there was political pressure there. And just as important, remember, this was the time where Bill Clinton himself got under criminal investigation. Remember, he had all the sexual allegations and rape claims against him and so forth. Two of them really stood out. One lady, Paula Jones, filed a sexual harassment suit against Clinton. And then the more important one, as it turned out, was Monica Lewinsky. I'll post it up here so you just get a sense. Everybody knows about it, I'm sure. But came to light in 1998. Sexual relationship between President and this White House intern, Monica Lewinsky. He said he never touched her, no relationship, blah, blah, blah. And then basically it led into charges of perjury. And then the OIC was conducting an investigation to impeach. So actually an impeachment case was levied against our president, the second president in our history ever to be impeached. Shows you this family. Who the hell are they? And just lying under oath, hiding files, sexual relationships, perjury, impeachment. This is what we're dealing with here. So now at this time, we have both Clintons separately under separate criminal investigations at the same time. And so the OIC basically had to make a decision. We're either going to pursue the case against Hillary Clinton for fraud and criminal charges relating to the Rose Law Firm and Whitewater, or we're going to have to focus our resources on the impeachment against Bill Clinton. And that's what they did. I mean, they only had so many resources. I mean, and these Clintons are involved in so many scandals, they had to actually pick and choose which to go after. So they went after the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and which actually took place. And incidentally, I'll post another article online here too, but you can see that because of that case with Bill Clinton, that he was actually disbarred. His law license was removed from both the Supreme Court and the state of Arkansas. Our president, his law license was removed. He was disbarred. So here we go with the Clintons, and we'll continue. Okay, so that basically wraps up the Whitewater case, which you can see is sleazy, convoluted, and whatnot. Now, the takeaway here pertaining to Hillary is because of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and because the government decided to impeach Bill Clinton and abandon the indictment on Hillary Clinton, you could say, in essence, that Monica Lewinsky actually saved Hillary Clinton from indictment. Anyway, let's continue. When the Clintons first got into the White House in 1993, January of 93, a scandal broke out that very first year called Travelgate. I'll post it up on the screen here and you can read it. But in essence, what happened there was, and you can see in the first line of this Wikipedia article, they say, the first major ethics controversy of the Clinton administration. There are many. In 1993, 7 employees of the White House Travel Office were fired. So basically, the Clintons got into the White House and they said, let's fire the travel staff and bring in our own friends to run the business so they could get paid the fees for running the White House travel staff business. So it broke in the news, and what happened was the Clintons were forced to let their friends go and fire their friends from the White House, which they just put in illegally, and bring back and reinstate the original people that they had fired without cause. Okay, this is in the very first few months the Clintons get to the White House. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so the next scandal happened again in 1993. I'm not going to spend too much time covering it because I don't want to get conspiratorial or whatnot, but I'd be remiss if I didn't actually mention it. It was the death of Vince Foster. Remember Vince Foster? He was a lawyer at the Rose Law Firm with Hillary, very close with Hillary. I believe they actually shared a brokerage account together. Many people rumored that the two were actually having an affair, but whatever. Vince Foster showed up dead one day at Fort Marcy Park, and an apparent suicide. Now remember, Vince Foster was brought into the White House by the Clintons. When they got to the White House, they brought Vince Foster to be the chief deputy counsel of the White House. He was the guy that was basically defending the Clintons on many of their of their conspiracies and investigations. He shows up dead in Fort Marcy Park. The next morning, Linda Tripp, who is a senior White House staffer, an administrative staffer, working directly in the West Wing, across from Vince Foster's office and directly next to Hillary Clinton's office. She says under testimony that the next morning, after Vince Foster was found dead in a controversial suicide, and you can look that up yourself, she saw staffers working for the Clintons removing files from his office. And many people thought that those files were in fact the billing records and other documents relating to Hillary's involvement with Rose Law Firm in defending that sleazy Madison Guarantee Savings and Loan. Those billing records, as it turns out, were found in Vince Foster's attic, as I mentioned before, a few years after he died. The other set was found in Hillary's quarters with her fingerprints on them. You heard me correctly on that. The second set of documents were actually found in the family quarters of the White House with Hillary Clinton's fingerprints on them. Okay, I'm going to put up on the screen here an article from the New York Times which outlines this. Hillary Clinton's fingerprints among those found on papers. Republicans on the Special Senate Whitewater Committee released a report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation today showing that the fingerprints of the First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton, were found on the records discovered in the White House family quarters 2 years after they were first sought by investigators. The FBI report also found that the documents, copies of billing records from Mrs. Clinton's work as a lawyer in Arkansas, revealed fingerprints of 5 others, including Vince Foster, etc. So, to recap this, these documents were under subpoena for 2 years, and Hillary Clinton had them the whole time. She had them hidden in her family quarters at the White House. These were the records that showed a direct link to her work at the Rose Law Firm representing Madison Guarantee, which she lied about. First, she said, I didn't really do any work for Madison Guarantee. It was another lawyer. And second, under testimony in front of our Congress, she says, no, I don't have those records. And here they are showing up in her house with her fingerprints on them. She lied twice under oath and had the records the entire time. This is exactly what she's been doing for the last 40 years. Going back first to the Watergate committee, where she stole all the files from public office and hid them in her office. Now she is stealing billing records and doesn't turn them over to the government while they're under subpoena. And even today, 20 years after this, we have the whole email scandal, her private server in her basement, which was illegal, and then deleting 30,000 emails, not turning emails over to our government under subpoena. Exactly the same case. For 40 years, it's exactly the same behavior. And it's just so upsetting. But anyways, I'll post an article here. I thought it was just really interesting on this note that the controversy surrounding the apparent suicide, because the OIC, again, was investigating this death, and the lead investigator, a guy named Miguel Rodriguez, I'm going to post up his resignation letter up on the screen. And you can see, basically, he was the lead investigator of this apparent suicide. He wrote a report to his boss, Kenneth Starr, at the OIC saying, I don't think it's a suicide. There's inconsistencies here, like a second trauma to the guy's neck, indicating a second bullet wound, etc., etc. I'm not going to get conspiratorial. All I'm going to say is this is the guy that was actually leading the investigation. And because the OIC put out a different narrative claiming that the suicide was obvious, he actually resigned. And this is his resignation letter. I'll just post up on screen. But I don't want to get too much into that. Let's just say it was a big scandal. It happened. He was an associate of the Clintons and really good friends with Hillary, and showed up dead in a park one day. So let's continue. Okay, so continuing in 1993. This is the first year that the Clintons are in the White House. Now, we already have 2 federal criminal investigations involving the Clintons separately with Whitewater. We have the Travelgate controversy, and then we have this healthcare controversy. I'll post a couple of articles on the screen here. But in essence, what happened was Bill appointed his wife Hillary in charge of our nation's healthcare system. So this article, I think, came out of Vanity Fair. We'll read it together. Soon after the inauguration, the president declared that his wife would be the Bobby Kennedy of his administration and assigned her the vital job of heading the National Task Force on Healthcare Reform, to amazingly few objections. But since then, Hillary has burrowed deep underground. Her healthcare task force began operations in such secrecy that she was sued in federal court and ordered to open the fact-finding meetings. We'll continue on another article. Bill put his exceptionally unqualified and unelected wife in charge of Hillary Care, the most expensive program in the country. She kept her task force on national healthcare reform away from public access and knowledge, resulting in a federal judge threatening to hold her in contempt. Ultimately, her behemoth plan was rejected by Democrats and Republicans alike and the medical community. The result was a massive revolt in Congress, with the Republicans taking control of both houses for the first time in 4 decades. The price tag for this Hillary Care hit the taxpayer at $32 million. Hillary was fined, along with others, $450,000 for dishonesty, and the court costs to taxpayers were $750,000. So in Bill's very first year in office, he appoints his wife, who had no idea and had no knowledge of health care, in charge of our whole nation's healthcare system. As a result, she, of course, did the whole thing in secrecy, away from everybody. A federal judge threatened to hold her in contempt, and eventually she was taken to court for dishonesty and fined $450,000. They scrapped the entire healthcare plan, and it cost the taxpayers $32 million. So that's Hillary Clinton's first attempt at healthcare, and I think we can all agree we don't want her anywhere near our healthcare system now. Okay, so moving along here, and by the way, just to close the loop on the healthcare fiasco, you know, what's really troubling is not that she failed. I mean, we all fail in certain projects at certain times of our life, but it's the way she handled it, the dishonesty that was mentioned, the secrecy. And this is the pattern that we're continually seeing time and time again. And that's the troubling part about the whole thing. Anyways, so moving along, now we're in 1994, and this is the cattle futures controversy. I'll post an article on the screen here. This is from the Washington Post, and you could take a second to read that. But basically what happened is there was an investigation into Hillary again, and this one was stemming from cattle futures trading. So she opened up an account in Arkansas. Her husband, Bill, is the governor of Arkansas, and she put $1,000 into her account. The very first trade that she made cost $12,000, which she didn't have the money for. But this brokerage firm here, Refco, out of Arkansas, basically covered her investment, which is illegal. And incidentally, her $1,000 investment turned into over $100,000 profit within 10 months. So there were some things going on here that were pretty shady and illegal. One of which was the person who was counseling her was the outside counsel for Tyson Foods, which was the largest employer in Arkansas. So this is kind of like a pay-to-play type thing. The outside counsel for Tyson Foods is giving Hillary information about the cattle futures markets, and they're using that information to make money. They're buying and selling cattle futures contracts when she doesn't even have the money to buy them. Refco is covering for her, and the whole investigation exploded. And basically it resulted in Refco being fined, I think it was $250,000, which was then the largest fine in the exchange's entire history. So just another example. The thought there was Tyson Foods and their outside counsel were saying, hey, let's give the Clintons some information. Let's let them make some money. And in return, the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, will give us, Tyson Foods, some concessions, tax breaks, other concessions, etc. This is pay to play defined. So that's the whole controversy relating to cattle futures and Hillary Clinton. Okay, so now we're in 1996 and another scandal broke relating to Hillary. This was known as Filegate. I'm going to post an article on the screen. Now, this one's from just Wikipedia because it just gives a nice little encapsulation of what happened. So the White House FBI files controversy. So the White House FBI files controversy of the Clinton administration, often referred to as Filegate, arose in June 1996 around improper access in 1993 and 1994 to Federal Bureau of Investigation's security clearance documents. Craig Livingstone, director of the White House Office of Personnel Security, improperly requested and received from the FBI background reports concerning several hundred individuals without asking permission. The revelations provoked a strong political and press reaction because many of the files covered White House employees from previous Republican administrations, including top presidential advisors. Under criticism, Livingstone resigned from his position. Allegations were made that senior White House figures, including First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton, may have requested and read the files for political purposes, and that the First Lady had authorized the hiring of the underqualified Livingstone. So what happened here is Hillary told this guy, Craig Livingstone, to go get FBI files relating to certain high-level Republican staff, including presidential advisors. Why? She wanted to have dirt on her adversaries, the Republican Party. And so she had this guy, Craig Livingstone, illegally retrieve these FBI documents so she could just read them and read about their past, their backgrounds, private information, and to hopefully use it against them at some point. So it's just so sleazy. At any rate, so this guy, Craig Livingstone, resigned. And at the bottom of that article, you can see that they refer to him as the underqualified Livingstone. So who is this guy, Craig Livingstone? Well, as it turns out, he was the son of a very close family friend of the Clintons in Arkansas. He had no background in anything. In fact, the position he held before he became the White House Office of Personnel Security. He was working in the White House. Prior to getting into the White House, his job was the bouncer at an Arkansas bar. So this is just, it's disgusting how Hillary, as the First Lady, using her political power to get documents, to steal documents. Do you see the pattern forming here? So at any rate, this was a huge controversy, and it just kind of plays in the same theme as the others. All right, we'll continue. In 1996, there was another scandal that broke involving the Clintons relating to campaign finance. And I'm going to post an article online here, again, from Wikipedia, just because it is a nice summary. You can Google it and find it all over the place, but let's just read it together. So the 1996 United States campaign finance controversy was an alleged effort by the People's Republic of China to influence domestic American politics prior to and during the Clinton administration, and also involved the fundraising practices of the administration itself. While questions regarding the U.S. Democratic Party's fundraising activities first arose over a Los Angeles Times article published on September 1996, China's alleged role in the affair first gained public attention when Bob Woodward and Brian Duffy of the Washington Post published a story stating that a United States Department of Justice investigation into the fundraising activities had uncovered evidence that agents of China sought to direct contributions from foreign sources to the Democratic National Committee before the 1996 presidential campaign. The journalist wrote that the intelligence information had shown that the Chinese embassy in Washington was used for coordinating contributions to the DNC in violation of the United States law forbidding non-American citizens or non-permanent residents from giving monetary donations to the United States politicians and political parties. A Republican investigator of the controversy stated that the Chinese plan targeted both the presidential and congressional United States elections, with Democratic senators, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this is just kind of what we're seeing today, and especially with the Clinton Foundation, where they're not supposed to be taking donations from foreign governments, but they do anyway. And when they do, they don't report it as they're supposed to by law. This was going back all the way to 1996. They were doing it for their own campaign. So they were using the Chinese government and working with the Clintons and their administration to donate money to get them reelected. So here we go again. So in the last piece we did, we were talking about the campaign finance investigations. That was affectionately known as Chinagate. But they mentioned in that investigation they were also looking into the improprieties relating to the Clinton Legal Defense Fund. So I thought it would be worthwhile just to take a quick minute just to talk about that a little bit. I'll post an article up on the screen. This is from the Los Angeles Times. So this is a legal defense fund. By now, as everybody realizes, there's so many scandals and so much investigation, conspiracy, cover-ups, etc. going on with the Clintons that they actually needed to set up a legal defense fund for themselves. So the president and the first lady actually set up a legal defense fund and asked the public to donate money into their legal defense fund to help pay for their attorneys to defend them for the crimes that they themselves committed. So this is the article from the Los Angeles Times. Defense fund is set up to help pay Clinton's legal bills. Aides say the call for donations is distasteful but necessary. Lawyers' charges could ring up as much as $2 million per year. So the audacity of this president and his wife Hillary to ask the public to pay for their legal bills for the crap that they got themselves into it just goes to show you this family. Who are these people? But I thought it would make some sense to cover that for a second. All right, so the next topic we move to is called CommerceGate. I'll post an article up on the screen here. This is, I believe it's in 1998. So again, just in summary form, you can Google it and find out all the information, but this summarizes it pretty well. CommerceGate was an event during the Clinton administration which conservatives labeled a scandal. It refers to the selling of extra seats on United States federal planes going on international trade missions for the purpose of raising campaign contributions. Nolanda Hill, a close business associate of Secretary of State Ron Brown, testified in court in 1998 that Brown had told her that trade mission plane seats were sold to business people who gave at least $50,000 each to the DNC. Arguing that to sell seats on a U.S. aircraft was unfair, U.S. District Court Judge Royce Lamberth heard Hill's testimony. Hill stated Brown was angered when White House political staff, this is the Clintons, made him give seats on trade missions for fundraising. Hill said Brown told her the main person involved at the White House was Alexis Herman, who would later become Clinton's labor secretary. Hill further claimed that Brown had told her that an assistant to Herman, Melissa Moss, wrote the original contribution letters which had angered Brown. Hill also testified that Brown had told her that President Bill Clinton and Mrs. Clinton supported the plan to sell seats for contributions. Investigation led to supposed improprieties in the finances of Secretary Brown. A federal judge later found that a U.S. Commerce Department official appeared to have deliberately destroyed subpoenaed documents relating to the department's trade missions to China. Brown died on a trade mission to Croatia when the government plane crashed into a mountainside in Croatia in 1996. This led to a conservative accusations that Clinton had Brown murdered. Yeah, this actually happened. So to summarize this, it basically speaks for itself. But the Clintons basically forced the Commerce Secretary, Ron Brown, to sell seats on U.S. government aircraft that were going on international trade missions to people who donated to their campaign of at least $50,000. So here we are going on a trade mission on a U.S. federal aircraft. There's empty seats on the plane, and they're selling those seats to Clinton supporters for $50,000 a pop. Who does this? And then one of the planes crashed and killed the Commerce Secretary, Ron Brown, who was angered by the whole thing, and he was threatening to go public with these allegations, and lo and behold, he dies in a plane crash. Okay, so the next scandal was relating to IRS audits against the Clinton enemies. So here's an article from Newsmax, which basically just entitles it, IRS official admits Clinton enemies were audited. An official with the Internal Revenue Service has admitted that legal opponents of former President Bill Clinton were singled out for tax audits, according to documents that were made public this week. So continuing the article here, you can see that anybody who messed with the Clintons, they would send the IRS after them to audit them. And look towards the bottom of this article where it discloses who some of these people are. Some of the ladies that accused him of sexual assault and rape, he sent the IRS after them to audit them. Jennifer Flowers, Liz Warden Grayson, sexual assault accusers Paula Jones and Juanita Broderick, and fired White House travel officer Billy Dale. Remember what we were talking about earlier about them firing the travel staff? That was done illegally. They had to bring them all back. Well, then he sent the IRS after the head of the travel staff to make his life miserable. In this article here, it continues, Fox News Channel analyst Bill O'Reilly, a frequent critic of Bill and Hillary Clinton, has also pointed out how the IRS has repeatedly audited him. Talk about an abuse of presidential power. Anybody who either says you sexually assaulted me or anything critical about the president or his wife, he sends the IRS after you to audit you. This really happened, and you can check it out online. Okay, we'll continue. Okay, there's only a couple more here. I promise. It's not going to take too much longer. Believe me, I could have made this hours long because there's so many scandals and controversies surrounding this family that I couldn't actually get it all in. It would be just too long. It's mind-boggling. So I'm going to cover just a couple more and then end the video. Maybe I'll do a part two. But we move in here to, this is the last year the Clintons are in office. Okay, so this is 2000. And many people know this already, but some people don't, and it's just disgusting what happened here. I'll post an article on the screen here. This is from the Los Angeles Times, entitled, Clintons began taking White House property a year ago. President Clinton and his wife started shipping White House furniture to the Clintons' newly purchased home in New York more than a year ago, despite questions at the time by the White House chief usher about whether they were entitled to remove these items. Okay, so this next article here is from ABC News and entitled, Clintons Return White House Furniture. So former President Clinton and his wife, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, now she's the senator for some unknown reason. That was another scandal in and of itself. But have sent $28,000 worth of household goods back to Washington after questions arose whether the items were intended as personal gifts or donations to the White House. We have been informed that it is being shipped back, said the National Park Service, and is ready to receive it and take possession of it and take custody of it. Jim McDaniel, the National Park Service liaison to the White House, said Wednesday. The property is being returned to government custody until such time that the issues can be resolved. It may well turn out that the property is rightly the personal property of the Clintons, giving back after they were criticized for taking $190,000 worth of china, flatware, rugs, televisions, sofas, and other gifts with them when they left. The Clintons announced last week that they would pay for $86,000 worth of gifts, or nearly half the amount. Their latest decision to send back $28,000 in gifts brings to $114,000 the value of items the Clintons have either decided to pay for or return. Yeah, you heard that right. In their last year in the White House, they steal White House furniture, rugs, dishes, paintings, and ship it to their personal home. Who does this? Who are these people? I mean, I don't think any of us would even fathom. It would be like staying at a hotel, waking up the next morning, and then stealing the television before you checked out. Except this is the White House, and this is the President and First Lady. And I think of all the scandals we just talked about, this one actually, even though it may seem de minimis to some people, I think it's one of the most important, because it goes to show you the character, or lack thereof, of this couple. Who would steal furniture from the White House? So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that actually happened, and you can pull up these articles online as well for yourself. Okay, we'll get one more and then I'll close out this video. So this will be the last scandal for this video, as if we don't have enough. But this scandal was literally on the very last day that President Clinton was in office. And it's known as Pardongate. I'll pull up a couple of articles here so we can get a handle on it. But this is from the American Spectator. An area of Clinton's scandals at their most blatant. For years, the liberal media have tried to defend almost every Clinton scandal. One of the few exceptions was Pardongate. During his 8 years in office, President Clinton granted 450 pardons and commutations. 39% of them were granted in his last day in office. He signed 140 pardons and 36 commutations. Most Americans were appalled by these disgraceful pardons. Many Democrats, from President Carter to Senator Schumer, refused to defend the pardon of Mark Rich. And we'll get to Mark Rich in a second. But as the article continues, after about a month after leaving office, President Clinton was getting so much heat and backlash from the pardoning of Mark Rich, who we'll talk about in a second, that he actually wrote an op-ed in the paper. And he says, the suggestion that I granted the pardons because Mr. Rich's former wife, Denise, made political contributions and contributed to the Clinton Library Foundation is utterly false. There was absolutely no quid pro quo. The article continues, it's remarkable that he admits that Denise Rich donated money and then he pretends it isn't connected to the pardon. She was no ordinary contributor. Denise donated $1 million to Democratic campaigns, including Hillary Clinton's 2000 Senate campaign, and she also gave $450,000 to Bill Clinton's presidential library. And in another article here, we can see that Hillary's brother, Hugh Rodham, was paid $200,000 to get a commutation for a drug dealer, Carlos Vignali, and another $200,000 to get a pardon for Glenn Braswell, who committed fraud. Both Bill and Hillary claimed they didn't know anything about the pardon. He was forced to immediately return the $400,000. Okay, there are tons of other pardons to talk about, including the 16 Puerto Rican terrorists known as FALN, who blew up a bar in New York City, France's Tavern, killing people, maiming people. They were sent to prison. But in short, Hillary was running for Senate in 2000, and New York City has a big Puerto Rican population, and they were basically clamoring for these terrorists to be pardoned from jail. Hillary wanted to get the Puerto Rican vote, so she convinced Bill to pardon these 16 terrorists who killed Americans in New York City, so she could get votes. But probably the most appalling of all was this guy Mark Rich, who we talked about. Mark Rich was a money launderer. He was a black market oil dealer. He was dealing with countries like Nigeria and other countries with dictatorships. And most appalling was that he was actually doing oil deals with Iran in 1979 when Iran was holding our American hostages. He's an American citizen doing deals with Iran. He was also doing deals with Cuba when we had a trade embargo. Anyways, he was laundering money. He was avoiding taxes, and an indictment was coming down on him, so he fled the country. He left. His wife was donating to the Clintons, and they were good friends with the Riches. These are the people that the Clintons call friends. He's a fugitive from law and actually on the FBI's 10 most wanted people in America. He fled the country. On Clinton's last day as president, he pardoned Mark Rich. That pretty much sums everything up. I'm going to stop the video here because I just wanted to make the video that related to the scandals up until they left the White House. And believe me, I missed some. I know people are going to be saying, hey, you missed this one and this one. And I know. There's just too many. And I also didn't cover the scandals when she was senator and most importantly, when she was Secretary of State. Now, these have been documented extremely well, and I would urge anyone who really wants to get a handle on what pay for play looks like while Hillary was the Secretary of State, watch the documentary Clinton Cash. You can YouTube it, it's free, and that'll give you a good understanding of how the Clintons used their political power to get their friends rich, and in return, those friends would donate hundreds of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. So I urge everybody to watch that documentary, Clinton Cash. As for now, that's it. My brain is fried. These people are criminals. We should all collectively decide never to let this family back into the White House again. There should be a restraining order from this family from getting anywhere within 500 yards of the White House. And I hope, even though this video was crude, it'll give you just a little bit of background that these scandals and conspiracies, especially relating to Hillary, go back 40 years. This isn't anything new. And to think that she could be the president of our country is a scary, scary thought. That's it. Thanks for watching.